There are so many subtle nuances to becoming a young adult. Consider all of the interactions a young person has on a daily basis. It can be something as simple as being a child out to dinner with your family. Your family is having a conversation, you have nothing to say, or there's nowhere that it makes sense for you to put your input. You sit and you observe their facial expressions, the way that they react to each other. Or it could be that you're a young person arriving at school and going to class. You sit down, you look at your peer next to you, you decide to engage in a conversation, or you decide not to. You sit and observe your classmates interact, or you sit and observe your classmates not interacting. All of these moments that have the option to engage verbally or to not engage and to sit and observe are moments of cognitive, social, and emotional development for young people. Adolescents are faced with more challenges than ever before. One of the biggest challenges they are faced with is the possession of smartphones, most specifically the use of social media. According to an online statistic collector called Statista, in 2021, 12.2% of children used a smartphone for the first time between the ages of 1 and 2. 16.1% used a smartphone for the first time between the ages of 2 and 3. According to Common Sense Media, an independent nonprofit research organization, a majority, that being 53% of kids, have their own smartphone by the time they are 11, and 69% have one at the age of 12. The number of 8-year-olds with phones grew to 19% in 2019 from 11% in 2015. Let's go back to these social situations. You're out to dinner with your family. They're having a conversation, one in which you have no input or you have nothing to say. You take out your smartphone and you're scrolling. Or they put a smart device in front of you and you're playing a game. You get to class, you sit down. Instead of looking at your peers next to you and observing and engaging, you have your smartphone out because you can have it out until the bell rings, and you're scrolling, you're typing, you're doing whatever you are until the bell rings and the teacher starts teaching. So much of our experience of growing up is being erased by this tool of distraction and entertainment. Take that a step deeper to see that instead of growing through having face-to-face interactions with our peers in real time, we are socially developing through virtual communication and connection. My question is, how is this affecting the minds of our youth, and what is the long-term impact going to be? Some argue that the youth have more creative possibilities available to them through this technology. According to another study that Common Sense Media did, they claim that consumption crushes creation. The majority of young people devote very little time to creating their own content. Just 2% of screen use among tweens and 3% among teens. Screen media use continues to be dominated by watching TV and videos, playing games, and using social media. Use of digital devices for making art, creating music, coding, or writing remains minimal. I'd like to share a quote from Tristan Harris, the former design ethicist at Google. We're training and conditioning a whole new generation of people that when we are uncomfortable or lonely, we have a digital pacifier for ourselves that is atrophying our own ability to deal with that. Doesn't that sound like it's going to have really negative long-term side effects? Doesn't that sound like it could belittle our ability to engage with our humanity? Let's look at some short-term side effects of smartphone use that have already been documented. In the documentary, The Social Dilemma, it's recorded that from 2009 through 2015, statistics revealed that girls ages 15 to 19 who were admitted to the hospital for non-fatal self-harm rose 62%. For girls 10 to 14, it rose 189%. even worse, in the same years, suicide rates of girls 15 to 19 rose 70%. For girls 10 to 14, it rose 151%. Is this a statistic we can honestly live with as informed adults? Don't get me wrong. I know that there are positive attributes to social media. We get to share our creative endeavors and our creative voices. We get to grow our businesses and receive business and produce income from that experience. We get to experience voices from those who are marginalized in our communities. There's really a lot going for social media. However, that being said, can we really justify these positive outcomes of social media knowing this statistic? So I decided to interview a friend of mine who's also a millennial working with our youth to see what she's experiencing in her office with her clients on a complete confidential basis in regards to the topics that are coming up revolving around smartphones and social media.
My name is Garland Middleton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I work with all ages, but my primary focus as a therapist in private practice is working with children and adolescents through young adulthood.
So my first question for you, Garland, is how do you feel that social media use and smartphone use is going to shape a generation long term?
When we look at the impact of social media on youth, it's important to acknowledge that in many ways we don't really know the long-term effects. We don't know how this is sort of shaping generations in many ways. There are many young people that have been born in a world where something like Facebook has always existed, something like Twitter or Instagram has always existed. So this is something that, as someone who works with young people, I'm curious about and in many ways worried about. How is social media going to affect generations? We do know that through surveys, through different research formats, young people are reporting that social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, especially TikTok, and then YouTube, that these formats do lead to an increased risk of anxiety, depression, poor body image, poor sense of self, comparative thinking, comparing your life to someone else's. It introduces young people to ideas of self-harm, eating disorders, the list goes on.
I'd love for you to go into some of the content that youth are being exposed to that you are learning through your practice, and also why that content ends up spreading like wildfire on social media platforms.
Although there's a lot of regulations for some of these formats, there's a lot of, there's a lot that's out of control. That something like Facebook can have a video that can get to TikTok and spread tens of thousands of times before any censorship can stop it. And this is problematic for many reasons. So in 2020, there was a video of a man completing suicide that had been recorded live on Facebook. Ultimately, that video got onto TikTok and eventually onto YouTube. So 3 different formats of social media. All of those formats have the ability for people to screen record and reproduce a video and then reshare it. And this video would be disturbing for anyone to see, any human being, but a trend came out of that through TikTok, which was recording young people watching the video to get their reaction, sort of reaction videos of watching a man complete suicide.
I would love for you to elaborate on why this is harmful for adolescents.
This is problematic for so many reasons. Very obviously, it's disturbing to see that, but the other issue is that when you are in young, middle, or early adolescence, or young childhood experiences, your brain is not able to process the content you're seeing. So not only is it incredibly stressful because your brain does not know what to do with what it's seeing, it's traumatic. It leaves an impression. It leaves a long-term impact. This is not the only example of that. There have been many videos like this. People recording themselves cutting themselves, people recording themselves purging, people recording themselves and their weight loss if they suffer from a form of anorexia or other eating disorders. So these videos are highly accessible and they spread like wildfire.
From there, I'd love to know, do our youth have an outlet to share about this? And, are they sharing about it outside of a therapist's office?
And they're not generally talking to adults about what they saw. And this speaks to a whole other thing, which is a lot of the people that maybe get sucked into social media that aren't able to say, hey, this is too much, or I need a break. The ones that aren't able to do that tend to be lonely in their own world, in their own life. And so they're not able to, their sense of community is not as strong maybe as someone else who maybe sees a video like that and says, ooh, this is really bad. Mom or dad, I just saw this horrible video. And then at least there's some processing. That does not happen for the majority of young people that watch these videos.
Yeah. Well, let's continue with our questions, and as the video progresses, we will revisit in what ways we as young adults, and elders can create containers for our youth to have a space to talk about their experiences. I'd love if you could share if there's any other trends we're aware of that have been happening.
More recently, there's been a trend on TikTok that the trend was a point of view video in which it was recorded mostly by adolescent or young adult males, in which they are describing taking a girl out on a date, and then they murder her, and they describe what they would do. So again, there's some obvious issues with that trend. One of the things that's the most disturbing to me as someone who works with domestic violence victims is that domestic violence impacts roughly 10 million people in the United States, male and female, every year. Statistics are staggering, and there's a whole lot of statistics on this, but we know that of those domestic violence incidences that lead to homicide, 94% of the victims are female. And so then we have this trend that is essentially bringing humor to the idea of murdering a date or murdering a love interest. There's videos talking about school shootings and loading guns and best ways to navigate a school to kill the most amount of your classmates. There's videos on proper ways to self-harm, how to hide self-harm. There's videos that describe all sorts of things that are, quite frankly, incredibly disturbing.
Whew. So much to digest, and so important to digest. So from here, I would love for us to talk about what can we do to change this? What are our options as adults now, aware of the circumstances, of the realities of what's being exposed to our youth?
As a therapist, when clients talk to me about this stuff, it's very concerning. What I try to do is acknowledge for anyone what they get out of something. So sort of how do we create change? To me, we have to find a little give and take. If we were to say to all young people, no more TikTok, it wouldn't work. They would find a way. We have to start to invite in some mindfulness, some awareness around what's going on. How do you feel when you're on social media? What's it like to see a video like that? How did you feel physically? How do you feel emotionally right now thinking about that video? What do you get from seeing these things? So I often start conversations with, tell me what you like about TikTok. Tell me what you like about Twitter. Now the thing with TikTok versus Twitter is that Twitter has far more censorship going on, and it's not necessarily videos, they're short edited things. TikTok can now go up to 10-minute videos, I believe. So there's these really long videos that can show up, showing some pretty disturbing stuff. It's the same thing with Facebook Live. Someone can record. I mean, there's been recordings of people beating up someone with physical disabilities. It's pretty disturbing. The other aspect of this is that there are people that are more susceptible to feeling, or I will say susceptible to behaviors that might not be considered healthy behaviors. So in social work, in clinical social work, and in psychology, we talk a lot about the biosocial theory. So the biosocial theory essentially looks at our biological makeup and how some of us are a little bit more susceptible to the world being overwhelming, to behaviors like self-harm, substance use, eating disorders, homicidal ideation, the list goes on. And that if their social environment is not so supportive, they are at an increased risk for turning to those behaviors. So if they are in an environment that's lonely, invalidating, so lacking proper validation from adults, teachers, caregivers, they are more likely to fall into behaviors that are seen as harmful. And something like social media, the whole format of social media lends itself to those isolated people. It gives a space for those people that feel lonely and on the outside, that are more susceptible or more sensitive to behaviors that are unhealthy. They have less sense of self, so they have less sense of identity, less sense of validation of self. And then they can use something like TikTok or something like Snapchat or anything like that to try to find community and connect. And ultimately, they are then more likely to see things like these videos I've mentioned already, these violent, scary, disturbing videos. So it's really a perfect storm for some unhealthy stuff. We do know systemically that in the United States, for instance, kids are under a tremendous amount of pressure to do well academically. I personally think that a lot of young people turn to social media as a way to disconnect and to zone out. I see a lot of adults that do that. If you are an adult, you can ask yourself, when do I typically use social media? It's usually to check out for a moment. And in that, we have these young people that feel basically like they're working, on average, an 8 to 3 or 8 to 4 o'clock school day. And then they have after school activities, and then they have homework. They will then go after all that stuff and be on TikTok for hours. They're not getting proper sleep then. They're not really getting proper socialization. They have no break. And I do think that one of the things I'm passionate about, at least, is trying to find a bit of a balance in life. So I can't change the entire school system in the United States, but I do try to invite in ideas of self-care beyond technology, because I believe that's how we can start to plant some healthy seeds and create a new environment for young people. Because ultimately, something like TikTok, with changing trends daily, it's also increasing our risk for ADHD-like symptoms. This idea of feeling impulsivity or lack of impulse control, this constant need for instant gratification, it's never enough feeling. Those things are all connected. The amount of young people that diagnose themselves through a TikTok video with ADHD that I see is staggering. It's wild. And no one's really looking at the existence of the anxiety they're feeling, right? The existence that they don't really give themselves a chance to just disconnect and sit with themselves. In cultures that push less pressure on academia and less pressure on instant gratification, countries like Norway, where they focus more on the outdoors and family connection, those are happier nations all around. They are happier nations on every level. Mindfulness, the idea of being present with oneself, not necessarily having a perfectly clear mind, but being present with oneself, has benefits. And social media takes us out of the present. It puts us somewhere else. I myself enjoy social media at times. I enjoy seeing friends' pictures on Instagram. But it's about balance, right? So we can't just shut it all down. But I am also aware if I've been on something like TikTok, or I should say Instagram too much, I will feel that affecting me. And I will take the app off my phone for a few days, for instance. But young people don't really have that capacity. And we know that TikTok or that Instagram or that Facebook or all these places are targeting young people. They know what they're doing. These corporations know what they're doing. So systemically looking at corporations, looking at the way we pressure young people in our country, what we prioritize, these are things, these are areas to look at. And I think that if we could, on an individual level and on a community level, focus on how we interact with young people. So not shaming them for social media use because they really can't help themselves, but finding ways to just add a sense of other things, importance in other things, importance in bringing awareness to how does your body feel when you've been sitting all day in school? How does your body feel when you have been looking at your phone scrolling for 3 hours? If we could start to bring awareness to that we might actually see some more overall change, because social media is not going anywhere, and yet it is quite damaging.
I know for myself, currently I am receiving a degree in art education so that I can become a art teacher in a public school setting. And my intention is to create lesson plans and projects that revolve around social media, that revolve around identity, that revolve around voice and the hidden voice and hidden stories, and give our youth a space and a safe container to explore what they're experiencing, what they feel like they can't share, what they feel like is really upsetting them, that they just don't have a space to talk about, and also the parts of themselves that they don't feel they can share on social media because it's not a popular expression or a normal expression. I feel super passionate about creating that type of space for young people, and I think that the more we can encourage that in whatever way possible in regards to the way that we relate to the young people in our lives, as opposed to, as Garland shared, trying to take away smartphone, trying to take away social media from them. I think the more that we can guide them towards more productive forms of expression and create spaces where it's safe for them to talk about what they're experiencing, as adults we have the power to organize, right? And so do young people, but they may not have the realization that they have that ability. They may not have the space, the materials, the means in any shape or form to organize in that way. So as adults, it's our responsibility to support those types of spaces to come into being. That could happen in so many different ways. I'm sure in most communities, leave comments, let me know. Do you have a community center near you? Do you have a recreational center? Are you, as an adult, as a parent, do you have the privilege or ability to create some sort of after-school activity for young people?
there are so many things that we can do where we don't even have to be present. We can just say, hey, we're aware that you all are having challenging experiences because you are subjected every day to a very large consumption of media that is ranging such a broad spectrum of what you're consuming. Some of it may be very positive, and some of it may be very negative and detrimental to your emotional, social, and mental well-being. So we created this space for you, this container, so that you can get together with yourselves and talk about what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. Most importantly, so that you know that you're not alone in these experiences. And also in this container, encourage like the kids to talk about how can we shift this? How can we change this? Like, what do we want to express on these platforms to help other youth that are outside of our community, to let them know that they are seen and they are not alone, you know? And then also, I think it's important to also have these containers that adults are present for, so that children know, young adults know, that they are not alone, that they have a support system, and that we are here for them, to hear them, receive them. We are not going to punish them. There's not going to be any shaming, no guilting. It's all just a free space, a safe space for them to express what they're experiencing and to find support, whatever that may be. There are so many different needs that are going to arise as we begin to create this space for young people. And yeah, so please leave comments below. Let me know your ideas. Let me know if you need support from me or from, your community. Like, any questions you have, I am totally available and ready and willing to answer your questions and create a dialogue around this, because my fear is that if we don't address this now, when it's really at a height of, it's just going to keep getting worse. And as Garland shared, like, this stuff spreads like wildfire. And what's going to start happening, like, potentially, if we don't address this, is really scary. And I think that it's really important to look at that and not bypass it, and not just trying to erase social media or to erase smartphones, because in my opinion, we're past the point of that being a possibility. And also, to consider as a parent, as I know that my mother, she didn't let me watch certain things on television growing up in the 90s, but then I'd go to my friend's house and I'd watch it anyway. So it's like, the more that we say no to a kid, the more that they will rebel against, and they will wonder and they will want it, So it's like, it's not that we want to hide from them what's really happening. It's that we want to say, hey, we are so aware that you are having this experience, and this is so not what we had as an experience growing up. And we are concerned because we know that this is having an effect on you, and we want you to know that we're here for you, and that you don't have to continue to engage with this. That yes, it's there, but you totally have the choice to step away from it and find more productive ways to be on the platform that are rooted in creativity and love and expression and excitement for life and activism, and virtual community that's like positive and supportive. So all that being said, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm actually going to leave my email please feel free to reach out to me through the comments, and we'll start a dialogue. And if it's appropriate, I would love to move that dialogue to email, maybe even to the phone. I want you to know that there is options. Like, if you're a parent or a teacher and you're really feeling this, and you're feeling the concern, and you want to have a conversation and explore ideas, I'm totally available and here for that, and I'm excited to have the conversation. So yes, that being said, lots of love. I hope that this doesn't, drag you down to the point that you're not able to act, because I think that the whole point of looking at the truth of the world is so that we can have the passion to act and not be dragged down every time something happens that's really upsetting, because if we allow ourselves to stay in that space of, tears and sadness, for too long, we lose the chance at taking that emotional energy and turning it into creative action. And that's really where I want to leave off on this video, is that whatever you're feeling after learning all of this, that energy can be spiraled into creative action to change the course of the experience of Gen Z and all of our youth that are coming up after them. And I hope that this inspires you, and I look forward to connecting with you more. Lots of love.